Most people spend their lives trying to keep up. They compare. They chase. They adjust themselves to match others. But the truth is, as long as you are competing, you are following. The moment you try to be better than others, you are still controlled by them. The Stoic mind rejects this completely. It does not chase approval. It does not follow trends. It does not measure itself against unstable standards. It creates its own. Because when you build yourself with discipline, with control, with consistency, you reach a point where comparison no longer matters. You are not trying to win. You are defining the level. And once you become the standard, no one can compare to you. Most people live for approval. They may not say it directly, but their actions reveal it. They speak carefully so others agree. They act in ways that are accepted. They adjust themselves to avoid rejection. And slowly, without realizing it, they lose something essential: control. Because the moment you depend on validation, your direction is no longer yours. It belongs to others. Their opinions decide your choices. Their reactions shape your behavior. Their approval becomes your goal. The silent mind sees the danger in this, because approval is unstable. It changes constantly. What people accept today, they reject tomorrow. What they praise now, they criticize later. If your identity depends on this, you will never be stable. You will constantly adjust, constantly change, constantly chase something you can never fully control. The dangerous mind refuses this completely. It builds internal authority, a standard that does not depend on external validation, because real power comes from self-definition, not external approval. When you build internal authority, you stop asking, "What do others think?" and you start asking, "What is right? What is necessary? What aligns with my standard?" This shift changes everything, because now your actions are guided by principle, not pressure. You are no longer reacting to opinions. You are acting from clarity. Most people fear disapproval. They avoid it. They try to fit in, try to be accepted by everyone. But this creates weakness, because when you try to please everyone, you lose your identity. You become adaptable in the wrong way, not flexible, but dependent. The silent mind understands that not everyone will agree, and that is not a problem. It is a requirement. Because if everyone accepts you, it means you are not standing for anything strong. Internal authority requires separation, the willingness to stand alone, to make decisions that others may not understand, to follow a path that is not popular. This is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. The dangerous mind accepts this discomfort because it knows that independence requires it. You cannot be controlled by approval and still become powerful. The two cannot exist together, so one must be removed. Most people remove discipline. The silent mind removes dependence. It stops needing validation to act. It stops waiting for approval to move forward. It decides, and then it acts. This creates confidence, not artificial confidence, real confidence, because it is built on self-trust. Every time you act without needing approval, you strengthen that trust. You prove to yourself that you can decide, that you can act, that you can stand on your own standard. Over time, this becomes your identity. You are no longer influenced by external opinion. You are guided by internal clarity. This clarity creates consistency, because your actions are not changing based on feedback, aligned with your principles. And principles do not change easily. The dangerous mind protects this alignment. It does not allow external noise to interfere. It filters opinions. It listens. But it does not depend. This is an important difference. You can hear others without being controlled by them. You can consider feedback without losing direction. But most people cannot separate this. They confuse listening with following. The silent mind keeps control. It decides what to accept and what to ignore. Because not every opinion deserves attention, and not every voice deserves influence. This selectiveness creates strength, because your direction remains clear. You are not pulled in multiple directions. You are focused, aligned, consistent. Internal authority also removes comparison, because you are no longer measuring yourself against others. You are measuring yourself against your own standard, your own discipline, your own effort. This creates growth, because the focus shifts from competition to improvement, and improvement is within your control. The dangerous mind understands that comparison creates distraction. It pulls your attention outward, away from what matters, away from what you can control. But internal authority brings that focus back, to your actions, to your decisions, to your discipline. This is where real progress happens. The truth is simple. You cannot become the standard if you are still seeking approval. Because standards are not defined by others. They are created from within. Once your actions are guided by your own principles, once your direction is no longer dependent on external validation, you become stable, unshaken, independent, and from that position, you are no longer following anyone. You are setting the level. Most people are not weak because they lack ability. They are weak because they avoid discomfort. They choose what feels easy. They follow what feels natural. They move toward comfort and away from resistance. And over time, this pattern defines their life. Because what is easy does not create growth. It maintains where you are. The silent mind understands this clearly. It knows that everything valuable is hidden behind discomfort. Discipline, focus, control, strength. None of these are built in comfort. They are built in resistance. The dangerous mind moves toward this resistance, not because it enjoys pain, but because it understands what it creates: growth, separation, power. Most people wake up and choose comfort. They delay effort. They avoid difficult tasks. They postpone what matters. I'll do it later, not today, when I feel ready. These thoughts become habits, and those habits become identity. The silent mind rejects this completely. It acts even when it does not feel ready, especially then. Because readiness is often an illusion. It does not come before action, it comes after. The dangerous mind knows this, so it does not wait for the perfect moment. It creates momentum through action, small actions, repeated daily, without excuse, without delay. This is where separation begins, not in big moments, but in small decisions. Choosing effort when comfort is available. Choosing discipline when distraction is easier. Choosing consistency when stopping feels justified. These choices seem small, but they compound. Over time, they create a gap between you and everyone else. Most people never realize this. They look for big opportunities, big changes, big moments that will transform everything. But transformation is built quietly, in repetition, in daily effort that no one sees. The silent mind understands that greatness is not dramatic. It is consistent. And consistency requires doing what others avoid, again and again. The dangerous mind becomes comfortable with discomfort. It trains itself to act despite resistance, to continue despite fatigue, to focus despite distraction. This training creates control, because you are no longer controlled by how you feel. You act based on decision, not emotion. Most people stop when it becomes difficult. They see resistance as a sign to quit. But the silent mind sees it differently. It sees resistance as a signal that growth is happening, that progress is being made, that separation is occurring. This perspective changes everything, because now difficulty is not something to avoid. It is something to use. The dangerous mind uses it as fuel, as proof that it is moving in the right direction. This mindset creates resilience, because you are not discouraged by discomfort. You expect it. You accept it. You move through it. And as you do, you become stronger. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, strategically. The silent mind also understands that most competition is eliminated by discipline alone. Not talent, not intelligence, discipline. Because most people do not maintain effort. They start, but they do not continue. They try, but they do not persist. The dangerous mind continues, even when it is slow, even when it is repetitive, even when results are not immediate. This persistence creates advantage, because over time, those who stop fall behind, and those who continue move ahead, without needing to compete. The truth is simple. You do not need to be better than everyone. You need to be consistent when others are not. You need to act when others delay. You need to continue when others stop. This alone creates separation. The silent mind builds this habit daily, through action, through repetition, through discipline in small moments. Because small moments create big outcomes. The dangerous mind trusts this process. It does not rush results. It focuses on effort. Because effort is controllable. Results are not always immediate, but effort always compounds. And over time, it produces results that appear sudden to others, but are actually built through consistent action. Most people will never see this, because they are focused on comfort, on ease, on what feels good now. But the silent mind focuses on what matters later. It sacrifices short-term comfort for long-term strength. And that is where true separation happens. The truth is clear. If you want to become the standard, you must do what others avoid, without excuse, without delay, without stopping. Because that is where growth exists, and that is where you rise above everyone else. Most people want results, but very few are willing to repeat what creates them. They want progress without process. They want success without structure. They want outcomes without consistency. And because of this, they remain stuck. The silent mind understands a simple truth that most people ignore. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Anyone can act with intensity for a short time. Anyone can push hard for a day, a week, even a month. But very few can continue when it becomes routine, when it becomes repetitive, when it becomes boring. This is where most people stop, not because they cannot continue, but because they lose interest. They rely on motivation, and motivation fades. The dangerous mind does not rely on motivation. It relies on repetition, doing the same actions again and again, without needing to feel excited, without needing to feel inspired, because it understands that results are not created by occasional effort. They are built through daily action, small actions, repeated consistently, over time. This is what creates power. Most people underestimate the impact of small, consistent actions. They think it is not enough, too slow, too simple. So they stop. They look for something better, something faster, something easier. But in doing so, they lose progress, because they abandon the only thing that actually works. The silent mind stays with the process, even when results are not visible, because it knows that progress is not always immediate. It builds quietly, in the background, through accumulation, and one day it becomes visible, suddenly, but not by chance, by consistency. The dangerous mind embraces this. It does not chase quick results. It builds long-term strength through daily effort, without interruption, without excuse. Most people break consistency for small reasons. They miss one day, then another. Then they stop completely, because they think the streak is broken, so the effort no longer matters. The silent mind rejects this thinking. It understands that consistency is not perfection. It is continuation. Even after disruption, even after failure, even after delay, it returns to the process, again and again. This creates resilience, because you are not dependent on perfect conditions. You continue regardless of circumstance. The dangerous mind builds identity through this repetition, because what you do daily defines who you become. Not what you intend, not what you plan, but what you repeat. If you act with discipline daily, you become disciplined. If you act with focus daily, you become focused. If you act with consistency daily, you become unstoppable. This identity is what makes you untouchable, because it is not temporary. It is stable, reliable, unbreakable. Most people cannot compete with consistency, because they do not maintain it. They stop when it becomes difficult. They stop when it becomes boring. They stop when results are slow. The dangerous mind continues, and that continuation creates separation. Over time, the gap becomes visible. Not because you did something extraordinary, but because you did something consistently, while others did not. The silent mind protects this habit. It removes distractions. It simplifies the process. It focuses only on what must be done. This clarity makes consistency easier, because there is no confusion, no unnecessary complexity, just action, repeated daily. The dangerous mind also understands that consistency requires structure, a system, a routine, something that removes decision-making from the moment. Because when you rely on decisions, you create hesitation, you create delay, you create inconsistency. But when your actions are defined, you remove that friction. You act automatically, without overthinking, without resistance. This creates momentum, and momentum makes everything easier. Because once you are moving, it takes less effort to continue. The truth is simple. You do not become untouchable through talent. You do not become untouchable through luck. You become untouchable through consistency. Because consistency is rare, and rarity creates value. When you show up daily, when you act without excuse, when you continue without stopping, you reach a level most people never reach. Not because you are different, but because you stick with it. But because you stayed when others left. The silent mind builds this without noise, without attention, without needing recognition. It focuses on the process and trusts the result, because it knows that consistency always produces outcomes, given enough time. And once that outcome appears, it looks effortless, it looks natural, it looks like talent, but it is not. It is discipline, repeated daily, without interruption. The dangerous mind understands this fully, and once it commits to consistency, it becomes unstoppable, because nothing can compete with sustained effort. Emotions are powerful. They shape perception. They influence decisions. They drive action. But without control, they become dangerous, because emotion without discipline leads to reaction, and reaction removes control. The silent mind understands this deeply. It does not try to eliminate emotion. That is impossible. Instead, it learns to manage it, to observe it, to control its influence before it turns into action. Because the moment emotion takes control of behavior, clarity disappears. Decisions become impulsive. Actions become inconsistent. And in that moment, power is lost. The dangerous mind refuses this loss. It builds awareness first, the ability to notice emotion as it appears. Anger, frustration, fear, pressure. Instead of reacting immediately, it pauses. Not for long, but enough to regain control. This pause is everything, because within that space, you separate feeling from action. You feel the emotion, but you do not obey it. This creates discipline, because action is no longer automatic. It becomes intentional. The silent mind uses this pause to think clearly, to analyze the situation without distortion. Because emotion exaggerates, it amplifies problems, it creates urgency where none exists. Without control, small situations become large reactions. The dangerous mind reduces this distortion. It brings everything back to reality. What is actually happening? Control. Mind understands that not every situation requires response. Silence is often stronger. Calmness is often more effective, because controlled behavior creates unpredictability. Not emotional unpredictability, strategic unpredictability. Others cannot provoke reaction easily. They cannot control your state. They cannot influence your behavior. This creates power, because control remains internal, not external. Emotional discipline also improves decision-making. When the mind is calm, logic leads. Clarity guides action. Decisions are based on reality, not temporary feeling. This creates better outcomes, because actions are aligned with understanding, not impulse. The silent mind builds this alignment over time, through awareness, through control, through repetition. It becomes natural. You no longer react instantly. You observe first. You think clearly. You act with intention. This creates confidence, because you trust your ability to remain in control. Not sometimes, always. The dangerous mind strengthens this daily. It does not allow emotion to dictate behavior. It does not allow pressure to break focus. It remains steady, no matter the situation. This steadiness creates dominance, not over others, over self. And self-control is the highest form of power. Because once you control your internal state, external situations lose their influence. They no longer control your actions. They no longer define your behavior. You remain consistent, focused, unshaken. The truth is clear. Emotions will always exist, but control determines their impact. Without control, they lead you. With control, you lead them. And when you reach that level, nothing external can disturb your direction, because your power is no longer outside. It is within. Unmovable, unbreakable. Your life does not rise to your wishes. It rises to your standards. Not what you say you want, but what you accept, what you tolerate, what you allow on a daily basis. This is what defines your level. The silent mind understands this clearly. It does not focus only on goals. It focuses on standards, because goals are temporary targets. Standards are permanent rules. Goals can be achieved and then forgotten. Standards remain. They guide behavior every single day. The dangerous mind builds these standards intentionally, not randomly, not based on comfort, but based on discipline. Because without strong standards, everything becomes optional. Effort becomes optional. Focus becomes optional. Consistency becomes optional. And when everything is optional, nothing is achieved. Standards remove this weakness. They create structure, clear expectations that must be met. No negotiation, no excuse, just action. This is where real control begins, because once standards are defined, decision-making becomes easier. You do not ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" You ask, "Does this meet my standard?" And if it does not, it is not acceptable. The silent mind uses this clarity to eliminate hesitation. There is no debate, no internal conflict, only alignment with what has already been decided. This creates consistency, because actions are no longer based on mood, they are based on principle. The dangerous mind raises its standards over time, at once, but step by step. Each level becomes the new normal. What was once difficult becomes expected. What was once effort becomes routine. This is how growth happens, quietly, gradually, but permanently. Low standards create limitation. They allow distraction. They allow delay. They allow inconsistency. And over time, these small allowances become habits. Habits become identity. Identity becomes outcome. The silent mind refuses to accept this. It removes what weakens it. It replaces it with what strengthens it. Higher expectations, stronger discipline, greater focus. This shift changes behavior, because behavior follows standards. If your standard is low, your actions will match it. If your standard is high, your actions must rise to meet it. The dangerous mind understands that discomfort is part of this process. Raising standards requires change. Change requires effort. Effort creates resistance, but that resistance is necessary, because without it, nothing improves. The silent mind accepts this. It does not avoid difficulty. It uses it as a sign of progress. Each time a higher standard is met, confidence increases. Not temporary confidence, real confidence, built on evidence, because you have proven to yourself that you can meet that level. This proof builds self-trust, and self-trust creates power. The dangerous mind protects its standards for comfort. It does not adjust them to fit the situation. It remains consistent, because consistency creates identity, and identity creates reputation. Over time, others begin to notice, not through words, through behavior, through consistency, through results. Because high standards produce visible outcomes, without needing explanation. The silent mind does not announce its standards. It lives them, daily, without attention, without validation. Because it understands that real standards do not need recognition. They show themselves through action. The dangerous mind also understands that raising standards eliminates competition, because very few are willing to maintain them. Many can start, few can continue. Even fewer can sustain high standards without lowering them. This is where separation happens. Not through talent, not through luck, through discipline maintained over time. The truth is simple. Your results reflect your standards. If your standards are average, your results will be average. If your standards are high, your results must rise to match them. There is no exception. The silent mind controls this. It decides what is acceptable and what is not. It builds a system that supports those decisions, and then it follows it, without hesitation, without compromise. This creates stability, because your actions are predictable, aligned, consistent. The dangerous mind becomes known for this consistency, because it does not lower its level, does not adjust to comfort. It maintains its standard, regardless of circumstance. This is what makes it powerful. Because power comes from control, and control comes from discipline. And discipline is built through standards. The final truth is clear. You do not become exceptional by wanting more. You become exceptional by requiring more from yourself. Daily, without excuse, without compromise. Because once your standards rise, everything else must rise with them. There comes a point where everything changes. Not outside, inside. A shift that removes comparison completely. Because the moment you become the standard, competition ends. Not because others disappear, but because your focus is no longer on them. The silent mind understands this deeply. Competing with others keeps you limited. It forces you to measure your progress against something unstable. Different people, different paths, different levels. There is no clarity in that, only distraction. The dangerous mind removes this distraction. It stops looking outward for comparison. It looks inward for improvement. Because the only real competition is who you were before. Nothing else matters. When you operate like this, everything becomes clear. Your focus sharpens. Your direction stabilizes. Your energy is no longer divided. It is concentrated. on growth, on discipline, on execution. This concentration creates power, because nothing is wasted. The silent mind builds itself without needing validation, without needing recognition, without needing to prove anything to anyone, because proof is not external, it is internal. You know your level, you know your discipline, you know your consistency, and that is enough. The dangerous mind becomes dangerous because it is self-contained. It does not rely on external motivation. It does not depend on comparison to feel driven. It moves because it has decided to, and that decision does not change. This creates independence, because your actions are no longer pulled by the outside world, are no longer influenced by others. They are directed by your own standard. This is what it means to become the standard. You define the level, not occasionally, but consistently, in every action, in every decision, in every moment where discipline is required. The silent mind does not lower this level for comfort. It does not adjust for convenience. It maintains it, because consistency is what makes the standard real. Not intention, not words, but repeated action. The dangerous mind understands that being the standard does not mean being perfect. It means being reliable, predictable in the best way. Your discipline is expected. Your focus is constant. Your effort does not change. This reliability creates trust, not just from others, from yourself, because you know you will act regardless of conditions. This self-trust is powerful, because doubt disappears. Hesitation fades, action becomes automatic, and when action becomes automatic, progress becomes inevitable. The silent mind also understands that comparison weakens identity. It makes you reactive. It makes you adjust based on what others are doing. But when you become the standard, there is nothing to adjust to. You are the reference point. Others may change, situations may change, but your level remains constant. This constancy creates strength, because you are not unstable, you are grounded, focused, unshaken. The dangerous mind protects this state at all costs. It avoids unnecessary competition. It stays aligned with its own path, because deviation breaks consistency, and consistency is what maintains the standard. Over time, this becomes visible. Not through words, through results, through presence, through behavior. People recognize it without explanation, because consistency cannot be hidden. It shows itself in everything you do. The silent mind does not seek this recognition. It does not depend on it, but it understands that it will come, naturally. Because standards create outcomes, and outcomes create attention. The dangerous mind remains unaffected by this attention. It does not change. It does not become distracted. It continues as it always has, focused, disciplined, consistent. Because the goal is not to be seen. The goal is to remain at the standard. The truth is simple. You do not become the standard by trying to stand out. You become the standard by refusing to drop your level, even once, even when it is difficult, even when it is unnoticed. Because the moment you lower your standard, you break your identity, and identity is everything. The silent mind protects it through discipline, through repetition, through control. Every single day, no exception. The dangerous mind commits fully to this path, because it knows that once you become the standard, everything changes. Comparison disappears. Distraction disappears. Certainty disappears. And what remains is clarity, direction, control. This is the final level. Not competing, not chasing, not proving, only becoming. Becoming the highest version of yourself, and maintaining it, without compromise, without hesitation, without stopping. Stop looking sideways. Stop measuring yourself against others. Build your own level and protect it every day. Because the moment you stop competing and start becoming, you rise into a state where nothing outside defines you anymore. You are no longer part of the comparison. You are the reference.